Good morning. Today we're going to read a classic, W.H. Auden's In Memory of W.B. Yeats, published after Yeats's death in 1939. Yeats was an Irish poet who came before Auden, Irish poet and mystic, a deeply influential figure. And Auden was born in 1907 and died in 1973. He's considered kind of like one of the great 20th century English poets. Born in England, emigrated to the US in the year of this poem, 1939, where he lived for many years and taught kind of around the country, including at the University of Michigan, where he was the mentor of Robert Hayden, who we've looked at in a previous video. Auden was gay, and he was friends with like all kinds of luminaries of 20th century English literature and art. His poetry, I'll say it often leaves me a little cold. I have this paperback collection, which I pick up once or twice a year, almost with a sense of obligation or duty, like, all right, I'm gonna take my medicine, I'm gonna read some Auden. And I just think that's because like I'll read like 3 or 4 poems and they feel a little at a remove, they feel a little icy, and I just don't get a lot from them. But then the next poem, the 4th or 5th poem, will just like blow me away. And I'll just think it's so beautiful and so deeply felt. And so that's why I keep coming back, I think. This poem is, of course, in the latter category. And it is in the great tradition of poets writing elegies to other poets they admire, who came before them, who passed during their lifetimes. And I think it is, in addition to being a beautiful poem about Yeats and about death, it is also about the universality of suffering and poetry's ability to help. And then published in 1939, it is very consciously anxious. There's an anxiety about the coming war, the war that has begun, that is in process, World War II. And the other thing I'll say about Auden is that he's another of these like chameleon-like figures, in that he was very comfortable exploring and writing in a huge assortment of poetic forms. So he was very enterprising that way. And I think you see in this poem, which is in 3 short sections, you can see that variety expressed pretty clearly here. Okay, In Memory of W.B. Yeats. 1. He disappeared in the dead of winter. The brooks were frozen, the airports almost deserted, and snow disfigured the public statues. The mercury sank in the mouth of the dying day. What instruments we have agree. The day of his death was a dark, cold day. Far from his illness, the wolves ran on through the evergreen forests. The peasant river was untempted by the fashionable quays. By morning tongues, the death of the poet was kept from his poems. But for him, it was his last afternoon as himself, an afternoon of nurses and rumors. The provinces of his body revolted. The squares of his mind were empty. Silence invaded the suburbs. The current of his feeling failed. He became his admirers. Now he is scattered among 100 cities and wholly given over to unfamiliar affections, to find his happiness in another kind of wood and be punished under a foreign code of conscience. The words of a dead man are modified in the guts of the living. But in the importance and noise of tomorrow, when the brokers are roaring like beasts on the floor of the bourse, and the poor have the sufferings to which they are fairly accustomed, and each in a cell of himself is almost convinced of his freedom. A few thousand will think of this day as one thinks of a day when one did something slightly unusual. What instruments we have agree. The day of his death was a dark, cold day. 2. You were silly like us. Your gift survived it all. The parish of rich women, physical decay, yourself. Mad Ireland hurt you into poetry. Now Ireland has her madness and her weather still, for poetry makes nothing happen. It survives in the valley of its saying, where executives would never want to tamper. It flows south from ranches of isolation and the busy griefs, raw towns that we believe and die in. It survives, a way of happening, a mouth. 3. Earth, receive an honored guest. William Yeats is laid to rest. Let the Irish vessel lie emptied of its poetry. In the nightmare of the dark, all the dogs of Europe bark, and the living nations wait, each sequestered in its hate. Intellectual disgrace stares from every human face, and the seas of pity lie locked and frozen in each eye. Follow, poet, follow right to the bottom of the night. With your unconstraining voice, still persuade us to rejoice. With the farming of a verse, make a vineyard of the curse. Sing of human unsuccess in a rapture of distress. In the deserts of the heart, let the healing fountain start. In the prison of his days, teach the free man how to praise. Thank you.